So let's go, all right? Mm-hmm. Alan Doyle, it's great to have you back in the studio with me once again.
And it is great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on this lovely day.
Well, last time you were here, we were talking about your first book, and now we have your second book. And I got to tell you, I was reading the book on the subway here this morning.
Yeah.
And I burst out laughing because of at least one of your multitude of adventures. Just give us a little description of the plane ride from Halifax to home.
Well, back in the day, Air Canada, or their affiliate out in the eastern part of Canada, had an Atlantic Canadian, subsidiary, or whatever we call it, Air Nova, and they flew very small Dash 8 airplanes back and forth between Halifax and St. John's, and we just ended up after the end of a tour on a long night out, and that we made our way just barely to the airport. And
dragged our way back
there. And I ended up sitting next to a lady who wasn't in much better shape than me. Unfortunately for both of us, I suppose, she had a baby with her, and he was a big fella too, and he was a handful. And to make a long story short, before I got back to St. John's, I had all manner of liquids and solids spilled upon me, all kinds of bodily fluids that you could not imagine, and along with the odd glass of rum and a beer and everything else. But yeah, it was just one of the many things that happened, when you play in a band for a living. That one of those adventures that sometimes makes the whole thing seem a little less glamorous than you might think.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's a great book. It's a story of a young man in a way discovering Canada. So it's a travelogue and an adventure of a band. I mean, the adventures. You tell the story of traveling across Canada and what Canada is. Mm-hmm. From a viewpoint of the band and all those wonderful and sometimes weird adventures. What is it like for you to discover Canada in that way?
It's a strange lens to see the country through in retrospect. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, is because I got to discover Canada through a very bizarre pair of glasses. First of all, I'm from the very edge of it. I'm from the very, 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 very edge of Canada. You can't go any further from one edge of it than where I live, And then, so there's a geographical thing that makes the Canada seem distant and far away. And of course, in my family, I'm a first-generation Canadian. My mom and dad weren't born in the country of Canada. They were born in the country of Newfoundland. And, so my mom and dad and my grandparents, they didn't know much about Canada. They weren't born in Canada. It was far away. So I didn't know much about Canada, except one of the only cities I knew about was Montreal, because I loved the Habs so much, as a kid. And then the other part, of course, the craziest part about the whole lens, as you say, is that when I finally did get to discover Canada, I discovered it out the window of a band van, and it makes for three things that makes for a pretty weird, pair of glasses to see a country through.
I'm always amazed. I've read a couple of other books, Night Drive, about the Rogers Band, Stan Rogers.
Oh,
band.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, it's tremendous, and in a way, it's similar.
Yeah.
But I'm always amazed because you know the phrase, "If you can remember the '60s, you weren't there," and I'm kind of surprised.
I've never heard that one. That's a good one.
Well, I'm always surprised.
I'm stealing that.
Okay.
I'm stealing that.
It's yours, Alan.
I'm taking it.
But you think, your wild escapades, often fueled by other things like alcohol,
late in the night,
and the fact that you can remember these things so vividly, it just surprises.
Well, I was sort of lucky because most of the stuff in the book sort of comes from a series of road journals I always kept, and many of which were sort of published on the Great Big Sea website. I started in the first years of Great Big Sea, I always had a little handwritten journal, and then around 1996 or 1997, like most bands, Great Big Sea got a website, and we needed content, to keep turning over on it. So I started writing a blog. I started writing a From the Road diary, and there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contributions and episodes of it, if you will, and that was a great piece of fuel. And then I'm also, I was very lucky to have Bob Hallett help me with the book. Bob is, lifelong great big sea fellow like myself, the fiddle player, multi-instrumentalist, and he helped me remember some of the things I couldn't remember as well.
What was it like for you when you, even though you had written some of these diary entries, sort of thing, to actually put them all together in the book and in a way, I guess, relive some of these experiences, like the elevator experiences?
Super fun, and I don't even think of it necessarily as nostalgia. I think of it as like just I that's the story so far, and like. And there'll be more to come, but I feel really lucky, right? Mm-hmm. I feel really lucky, first of all, to have just gotten across the country and seen, a good deal of it, because most people don't ever get to do that. But again, getting to see it in a band, you get these experiences that most people don't get, right? And the simplest way I always explain it is that, if you're a tourist in a town, you walk in through the front door of just about everywhere. But if you're in a band for a living, you load in through the back door, right? And usually there's somebody local helping you load in through the back door who knows the keys to all the other back doors in the town. And so it gives you kind of an instant, like, sort of familiarity or access to, like, the town and the people of the town that most people don't get. And I've always loved that, and I still do.
Another aspect of the book that caught my attention, as it were, musicians who have lives like yours always have a great story about a guitar. I mean, Stompin' Tom had a great story about his guitar, and there's a few other people. And tell me a bit about your J200.
Oh yeah, that's from Omer. God rest his soul. He passed away just not long ago. Omer had a strange business in North Bay, Ontario, and if you walked out of the back, the loading again through the back door of the theater, you could really only see one sign across the street for all the shops and stuff, and it said Omer's Guitars and Vacuums. And at different time, it actually had a third thing on it called Pet Grooming. Omer's Guitars, Vacuums, and Pet Grooming. And I remember just seeing that the first time I was in North Bay, Ontario, thinking that guitars and vacuums. Like, it was so bizarre that I had to go over to see. And then I met this lovely man, Omer, who was, a real gent, and could take apart a vacuum and put it together without looking at it, and had a great collection of guitars there. And I, as the story goes in the book, I was always looking for a certain kind of guitar, like Tommy Hunter used to play, and me and my father would fantasize about getting a Gibson guitar or a Martin guitar, and anyway, to make a long story short, Omer hooked me up with one of the ones me and my father always wanted for a very low price, provided I shared it with my father when I got home. And he was such a nice man, and I always give him a shout out from the stage. And just one of those people, again, that when you're making your way across the country, you hope you meet. You hope you meet someone as cool as that, and I got to. So.
And in fact, that guitar has been, which came out of the back of the shop.
That's right. Yeah, he went and got it from me in the back and said, "I got one like you're looking for," and it was, it was an expensive guitar, but he gave it to me for basically half price, provided I shared it with my dad, which I still do. And it's been on literally hundreds and hundreds of records in Newfoundland and been in a bunch of concerts.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have in fact recorded with that guitar.
Oh my God, yeah, a lot of records. I mean, for the longest while in St. John's, kicking around in the music scene, was the only Gibson J200, because they're kind of rare. Like, not everyone has the old ones, and I lucked into this one, so it's on everybody's record.
Now, the last book you wrote, you also had a record to accompany it, and now you've got a new record out as well, A Week at the Warehouse. Tell me a little bit about this record.
It's really it features me and my live band, and we met at the famous Warehouse studio in Vancouver that Bryan Adams owns, and it's a big open warehouse of a studio, big enough to accommodate a whole bunch of musicians playing at once. And I wanted to do a record like that because I wanted people to know what the live concert would sound like in a perfect environment right now. And I wanted to find somebody who still made records in that old-fashioned kind of way, that was still willing to go and put a whole bunch of people in a room and try to make sense of it. And the name that came to my mind is one of my musical heroes, a guy named Bob Rock. And Bob is from Winnipeg, but spent most of his life in Vancouver or in Hawaii in the 80s and 90s, and he produced some of the biggest rock records in the world. I mean, Metallica and Aerosmith, and mixed, like, AC/DC records, and did a bunch of Tragically Hip, and did a bunch of Jan Arden, a bunch of Michael Bublé and Van Morrison, and I just couldn't believe I got a chance to work with him and to record, Newfoundland tinged, country and rock and roll under the guise of Bob Rock. That was pretty cool.
Alan Doyle, it's a pleasure having you here, and once again, thank you for a most enjoyable book, a wonderful way to spend quite a few hours, and a new record to go as well. So thanks
Thanks so
you very much.
Thank you, guys.